Okay, and welcome back. This should be the last episode of the Sabotage game. And if you noticed, the game windows changed. I selected the main camera, and I went to the background, and I changed it to black. This should make the special effects stand out a little more. So in this episode, we're going to be adding all the cool sound effects to really enhance the game. Now, instead of having you create the sound effects, I have put the sound effects available for download on our website. On the website, www.millsgamedev.com, and under the download section, if you scroll down to Sabotage, you'll see there's a sound effects zip file available for download. So download that now. So you should end up with a folder with 9 sound effects in it. So we need to put the sound effects into the asset folder. A quick way to get to the asset folder from Unity is to right mouse click on the asset in the project hierarchy and select Show in Explorer. Now we can open up assets and drag in the sound effects. So back in Unity, you should see the sound effects folder. And if you open that up, you'll see all the sound effects we're going to use. Before we start coding in the sound effects into the sprites and the prefabs, we need to turn some of these into standalone game objects. If we have them attached to a sprite, they'll disappear when the sprite is destroyed. So they need to be standalone objects so they can remove themselves when they're finished playing. So we do this by going to Game Object and creating an empty game object. So let's change the name of this game object to Boom Sound. We'll go to the inspector and add a component. We'll add audio source. In the audio clip, we will select Boom. Now we need to add a special component which will destroy the game object when it's finished playing. So add component, and we're going to create a new script, and we're going to call this destroy on sound end. So this is a very simple controller. All it does is, during the update routine, it checks to see if the component of the game object audio source is finished playing. If it has, then it will destroy the object. We're going to be using this script in all of the standalone sound objects we create. So this sound is ready to be turned into a prefab. Let's drag it into sound effects and remove it from the hierarchy. The falling sound effect will be part of the trooper object, so we don't need to create a standalone for that. The fire sound effect will be part of the bullet, so we don't need to create a prefab for that. The fireworks sound will be attached to the firework particle system, so we don't need to create a prefab for that. The helicopter loop will be attached to the helicopter sprite, so we don't need to create a prefab for that. The hit object will be created when the trooper is destroyed, so it needs to be a standalone object. Create an empty object, and let's call this hit sound. We'll add an audio source, and we'll add the hit sound. There's 2 options. There's hit 1 or hit 2. Use whichever one you like. I'm going to use hit 1. And now we add the component destroy on sound end. Next, make the hit sound a prefab. The scream will be called when the trooper is destroyed, so it needs to be a prefab. We'll add the component audio source and select the scream sound. and add the destroy on sound end. Drag the scream sound into the sound effects panel to create a prefab, and we'll remove it from the hierarchy. The squish sound is also needed to be a prefab. We'll add the audio source, set it to squish, and add the component destroy on source end. Turn this into a prefab and remove it from the hierarchy. So we need to teach all the objects that make sound how to play the sound. So let's go back to our assets. And the first sound to add is with the bullet. So in the bullet prefab, we're going to go down to the bottom and add a component, audio source. And we're going to select the audio clip, fire. Whenever the bullet gets instantiated by the cannon, it'll make that sound. The next sound is with the helicopter. In the helicopter prefab, we will add the component, audio source, and we will select the audio clip, heli loop. This is helicopter chopper sound, and it's in a loop. So we'll play on awake, but we need to check the loop button so it will keep playing if it hits the end. Now we don't want it to be as loud as the rest. We want it to be a background sound, especially since there's going to be so many helicopters. So let's turn this down to 0.2. Now we want it to sound like the sound is coming from the side of the screen the helicopter's on. So we need to go to the helicopter controller. In the helicopter controller's update routine, we will pan the audio depending on the position of the helicopter. The audio source's pan stereo field takes a value of -1 to +1, -1 being the left and +1 being the right. So we'll take our X position and divide it by 9, so we'll get a value of -1 to +1. While we're here, we're going to add the public game object boom so that we can have the boom sound effect when the helicopter is destroyed. In the helicopter controller's shrapnel spawn routine, where we create 3 different pieces of shrapnel, we also create the boom sound effect. We instantiate the object, and then we set the pan stereo to the current position of the helicopter. We also set the pitch between a random range of 0.8 and 1.2, just so it has a little bit of difference between the different explosion sounds. Back in Unity, we've selected the helicopter prefab, and in the helicopter controller, we're going to set the boom object to be the boom sound. The falling sound is used by the trooper. So we go to the trooper prefab, and we add a component, audio source, and we set the audio clip to be falling. We turn off the play on awake, and full volume should be fine for this. So in the shoot opening routine of the trooper controller, where we see if the fall speed is higher than 3, and we haven't used the shoot yet, we create an else condition. We check to see if the shoot has been used and the fall speed is greater than 3, and the falling sound is not playing. If it is, then we'll start playing it. While we're in the trooper controller, let's add the sound effect game objects. We're going to launch a hit sound when we get hit by a bullet. We're going to call the squish sound when we fall too fast. We're going to spawn the scream sound when a trooper lands on top of us. In the routine that checks to see if we collide with a bullet, if we got hit, we will create a hit sound effect, and we will set the pan stereo value to be our current position divided by 9. In the trooper landing routine, where we check the speed, if we do travel too fast, we will play the squish sound. We will instantiate it and then set the stereo value to be our current position divided by 9. In the routine that checks for falling troops, we will create the scream sound and again set the pan to our current position. The trooper sure has a lot of ways to die. In the trooper prefab, let's set all the sound objects that we just created to their prefabs. We'll set the hit sound to be the hit sound prefab. The squish sound will be the squish sound prefab. And the scream sound will be the scream sound prefab. Now let's add the firework sound to the firework prefab. Select the firework prefab and scroll down to the bottom. Add a component. We'll add an audio source and set it to firework. I think we're ready to give this a try. You can see sounds really improve a game. Okay, let's see if the fireworks will make a sound. And I think we have a pretty good game. Well, my nerdy friends, that wraps up the Sabotage game. We did a pretty good job. To get the full effect, we go under File and we say Build and Run. And we'll call this game done. So, until the next project, until the next episode, stay nerdy, my friends. I'm gonna have some fun playing Sabotage.